All right, let's talk about something we see every single day. Surveys and polls. They're everywhere, right? They tell us what to buy, who might win an election, what everybody's thinking. But how much can we really trust them? Let's pull back the curtain and find out. You've probably felt this. You see a headline that says, 60% of people believe X, and you're thinking, really? I don't know a single person who thinks that. It's so easy to be skeptical, and honestly, you've got good reason to be. A lot of the surveys out there are built on some pretty shaky ground. Here's the thing. Making a good, truly unbiased survey is incredibly hard. It's both an art and a science. But making a bad one? That's shockingly easy. And it happens all the time. Sometimes it's an accident, but sometimes it's completely by design. I mean, just look at this question. This is a masterclass in how to lead someone to an answer. It's not really asking about a tax, is it? It's emotionally framing it. Of course you want children to succeed. Who would say no to that? It's designed to corner you into saying yes, no matter what you actually think about tax policy. So it really boils down to two things, two fatal flaws. First, you could have the most perfectly written questions in the world, but if you ask a biased group of people, your results are totally worthless. And on the flip side, you could have a perfectly representative group, but if your questions are confusing or loaded, well, the results are just as useless. Let's tackle that first flaw, asking the wrong people. Okay, so before a single question even gets written down, the most critical decision a researcher has to make is who are we going to ask? This is all about the science of sampling, and it is the absolute bedrock of any survey you should ever trust. And the goal isn't just to get a random bunch of people, it's to get a representative group. Think of it like this. Imagine you've got a giant box with 1,000 marbles. 400 are red, 600 are blue. Now, if you give that box a good shake and pull out a sample of 100 marbles, you'd expect to get about 40 red and 60 blue, right? Your small sample is a perfect little mirror of the whole box. That is exactly the goal with people, too. So there are basically two main ways to do this. You've got probability sampling, which is the gold standard. That's where everyone in the group you're studying has an equal shot at being picked. Then there's non-probability sampling, like just surveying people who are easy to find online or on the street. It's way cheaper and faster, which is why we see it so often, but it is so dangerous because the people who are convenient to reach might all think alike, which completely skews the results. Any poll you see that's worth its salt starts with probability sampling. This right here is maybe the most misunderstood idea in all of polling. A massive sample that isn't representative, say an online poll that only people who are really passionate about the topic answer, is completely and utterly meaningless. A smaller, carefully built, representative sample will always be better than a huge, biased one. Okay, so we've covered fatal flaw number 1. Let's move to flaw number 2, asking the right people the wrong questions. Even with a perfect sample, the way you word a question can just destroy your results. Now, there are a ton of mistakes you can make, but we're going to look at 3 of the most common and most deadly sins of question design. First up, the sin of ambiguity. This is what happens when you use words that mean different things to different people. You end up with a bunch of data that looks clear, but it's actually garbage because nobody was answering the same question. For instance, what on earth does often mean here? To a pro bowler, often might be 5 times a week. To me, it might mean once a month. To you, maybe it's twice a year. See the problem? Our answers are based on totally different definitions, so you can't compare them. The data is meaningless. And the solution? It's actually super simple. Be specific. Instead of using these fuzzy words, you give a clear time frame, in the last month, and you use concrete numbers. Now everyone is answering on the exact same scale. This gives you data you can actually trust. Oh, this next sin is a classic blunder. It's the double-barreled question. This is where researcher sneakily crams 2 different questions into one sentence, but only gives you one option to answer. So what are you supposed to do here? What if you drink it because you know it's healthy, but you secretly think it tastes awful? Or what if you love the taste, but you know it's a total sugar bomb? There is no way to answer this question honestly. A good survey would just break this into 2 simple questions, one about taste and one about health. Easy. This next one feels like it should be obvious, but it happens all the time. Researchers who are experts in their own little world just forget that the average person doesn't know all their technical terms and industry jargon. And honestly, this is just hilarious, but it proves the point so perfectly. You can never, ever assume your audience knows your lingo.
Can you imagine the kind of data you get back from a tech survey if people thought a motherboard was part of a cruise ship? It's just wild.
So you might be thinking, okay, get the right people, ask clear, simple questions. I'm all set, right? Well, not quite. Even if your questions are perfectly written, you can still mess up the results based on the order you ask them in. A really smart way to avoid this is called the funnel technique. You start out broad with easy, interesting questions to get the person warmed up and comfortable. Then you slowly narrow down to the more specific stuff. And, this is crucial, you save the really sensitive personal questions like age and income for the very, very end. By that point, you've built up some momentum and trust, and people are much more likely to answer. Okay, let's bring this all home and talk about that one famous phrase you always hear whenever polls are mentioned, the margin of error. What does that little plus or minus number actually mean? So let's say a poll finds that 45% of people support candidate Jones. You have to remember that 45% is just the result from the small group they talked to, the sample. It's their best guess. The margin of error tells us the range where the true number for the entire population is likely to be. So if the margin of error is, say, plus or minus 3%, it means we're pretty darn confident the real level of support is somewhere between 42% and 48%.
Now, there's a really clear connection between your sample size and that margin of error. A bigger sample gives you a smaller margin of error. Your guess gets more precise. But, and this is the key part, you get diminishing returns. Look at this. Going from 100 people to 1,000 people makes a huge difference. The error shrinks dramatically. But then, doubling that all the way to 2,000 barely gets you another percentage point of accuracy.
I love this analogy because it explains why national polls don't need to interview millions of people. Think about it. If you're at a chili cook-off, you don't need a giant ladle to taste a huge 10-gallon pot of chili. A little spoonful will do. And you'd use that same little spoon for a tiny 1-gallon pot, too. As long as the chili is well stirred, meaning your sample is representative, one taste tells you what the whole pot is like. The size of the population just doesn't matter nearly as much as people think. So at the end of the day, good survey design is all about focus and efficiency. It's about asking the right questions to the right people in the right order, all while respecting their time and attention. That's the whole game. So now you have the toolkit. The next time you see a poll in the news, you can be a detective. Ask yourself, who did they talk to? Was it a truly representative sample? How did they word the questions? Are they trying to lead me somewhere? When you start looking past the headline and asking these questions, you become a much smarter, much more critical consumer of information. Thanks for diving in with me.